In every small garden, there comes a moment when the gardener looks at their limited space, sighs, and thinks, if only I had just a little more soil, a little more ground, a little more room to grow the things I love. But what many people forget is that a garden isn't only measured by the width of the land beneath your feet. Sometimes, the most abundant gardens aren't the widest, they're the tallest. Because the moment you start looking upward, you unlock a world of possibilities that most gardeners never explore. And today, we're climbing right into that world. Imagine a small backyard, or even a balcony garden, where every inch of ground is precious. Now imagine that same space transformed into a living tapestry of edible vines, twisting their way up trellises, weaving through fences, stretching across archways, and offering food season after season without needing to be replanted. That's the power of perennial edible climbing vines, plants that grow once and keep feeding you for years, while barely taking up any ground at all. They don't demand much, yet they give generously. They don't compete with your vegetables for soil, yet they produce as if they own an entire field. And best of all, many of them are the kind of plants you'd walk past in nature without ever realizing they're edible, or useful, or capable of thriving in a tiny urban garden. So, as you listen to this, picture your own space, not as it is right now, but as it could be. Picture bare walls becoming green. Picture old fences turning into food-producing machines. Picture your garden not just growing, but rising. Because what you're about to discover isn't a list of common backyard plants you've heard 1,000 times. No, this is a collection of 10 remarkable, often overlooked climbing perennials that quietly deliver food, beauty, shade, and structure without a huge budget, without complicated care, and without taking up more than a sliver of soil. Some of these vines produce fruit. Some produce edible leaves. Some produce shoots that taste like vegetables. Some even create natural air conditioning for your home by shading walls and cooling outdoor spaces. And all of them have one thing in common. Once they're established, they return year after year, often with more vigor, more growth, and more harvest than the year before. As we begin this journey, imagine the first plant appearing on screen. Not something overly familiar, not the typical vine you see in every garden center. Imagine something that feels like a secret, like a vine gardeners whisper about, the kind you only discover after years of experience. And yet, it's one any beginner can grow. The first vine sways gently in the wind, tender tendrils reaching out as if searching for a place to anchor. It doesn't demand a huge structure. Give it a simple trellis, the side of a shed, a few strings tied vertically, or even an old bicycle frame, and it will happily climb. This plant is the kind of perennial that rewards patience. In the first year, it will spend most of its time quietly establishing roots. Not dramatic, not flashy, but the second year, that's when it leaps. Suddenly, the vine that once crept forward now expands like it's been waiting its whole life to grow. By the third year, you're harvesting more from it than you ever expected, wondering how such a small section of soil can feed you this much. The leaves are tender, especially when young, and taste mild and green, perfect for salads or stir-fries. The shoots can be sautéed like asparagus, and depending on the variety, it may even produce edible flowers that look delicate but are surprisingly resilient in heat. This vine isn't just food, it's a lesson in how nature rewards patience. And in a world where everyone wants instant results, this plant quietly grows in its own timing, offering not just harvest, but a deeper appreciation for slow gardening. Now imagine the second vine. This one is more dramatic, more vigorous, and often misunderstood. People plant it without realizing its edible potential, and others avoid it because they think it's too wild. But trained properly, it becomes one of the most productive vertical plants a small space gardener can grow. It produces long, spiraling tendrils that grip onto anything nearby, so it needs direction, an archway, a pergola, a fence, and once it knows where to go, it climbs with purpose. The leaves of this plant are edible when cooked, tender, rich in nutrients, and perfect for soups, stews, and wraps. And the flavor. Think spinach, but sweeter with the texture that holds up beautifully in heat. Unlike many leafy greens that collapse in tropical sun, this vine thrives in warm weather and grows even faster the hotter it gets. For gardeners in small spaces with intense heat, it becomes a dependable source of greens, even in the harshest months, something very few plants can claim. Then we move to a third vine, something far more unusual. A plant that feels almost ornamental until you learn its secret. Its flowers are edible, its leaves are edible, its stems can be cooked, and the young pods, if allowed to form, taste like a subtle, earthy vegetable. This is the kind of plant that makes visitors stop and ask, wait, you can eat that? And that curiosity becomes a gateway to conversation, connection, and community. Because a garden is never just a garden, it's a story. And plants like this add chapters of wonder and surprise. This vine isn't aggressive, but it is persistent. It grows at a steady pace, weaving itself into whatever support you provide and returning every year with more strength, and more harvest than the year before. If you position it in a corner that needs a little charm, it will transform that space into something soft, inviting, and alive. Next comes a vine that has been grown for centuries, but very few small space gardeners know they can grow it vertically. This plant typically sprawls across the ground if left alone, but give it a rope, a trellis, or a fence, and it climbs beautifully, making it perfect for tiny gardens. Its fruit is edible, its leaves can be cooked, and its flowers attract pollinators while also being edible in certain varieties. In many cultures, the young fruit is steamed, stewed, or added to curries. It's a plant that feeds, cools, and beautifies at the same time. And then, just when viewers think they understand where this video is going, we introduce them to a vine with a personality of its own. A vine that grows fast, almost too fast, and needs occasional trimming, but pays back that little effort 100 times over. Its leaves are soft and mild, its shoots taste almost like a mix between green beans and tender spinach. And once it matures, it becomes a living curtain, offering shade, privacy, and food all at once. Place it near a window, and it creates natural cooling. Place it near a walkway, and it softens the space with flowing greenery. Place it near a wall, and it turns a plain surface into a living mural. This vine isn't just for eating, it's for creating atmosphere. Imagine sitting under it on a warm evening, hearing the leaves rustle gently, while the vine grows quietly above your head. It becomes part of your environment, as much as a plant. Now let's introduce another perennial admirer often overlooked, a vine whose flowers taste subtly sweet and make beautiful natural garnishes. Many people grow it purely for decoration, unaware that the flowers are edible and that the leaves can be brewed into herbal teas. The vine itself is lightweight, almost airy, dancing even in the slightest breeze. It climbs steadily, but not aggressively, making it ideal for gardeners who want something manageable, elegant, and multi-purpose. Next comes a plant that produces edible shoots with a surprisingly crisp texture. When harvested young, the shoots snap like a fresh green bean, and the flavor is mild, making it versatile in cooking. What makes this vine special is how little care it needs. It can handle partial shade, full sun, poor soil, or rich soil. It simply adapts, and once established, it returns every year even if you ignore it half the time. Then we move to a vine known for producing fruits that look exotic but are incredibly easy to grow. The fruit hangs like ornaments, dangling beneath the canopy of leaves, each one offering a refreshing bite. Visitors will assume it requires high maintenance, but it doesn't. Once the roots take hold, it spreads upward effortlessly, using any support you provide. And as long as you keep harvesting the fruit, it will continue producing them continuously throughout its season. And so the list continues, each vine bringing its own unique charm, personality, and edible offering. Some vines blanket structures with dense leaves. Others grow in delicate patterns like natural lace. Some vines produce harvests weekly. Others gift you with one powerful flush of food each year. But all of them share a common truth. They turn vertical space into opportunity. By the time we reach the 10th perennial vine, the viewer begins to see their garden differently. Walls are no longer plain. Fences are no longer wasted. Pergolas become edible. Arches become productive. Even a simple balcony railing becomes a food-growing structure. The mental shift is powerful, realizing that you don't need more land to grow more food, just a willingness to let your plants climb. Because in the end, a vertical garden isn't about plants growing upward, it's about thinking upward. It's about understanding that abundance doesn't always require expansion. Sometimes it just requires imagination. And that is the moment when the viewer begins to believe, truly believe, that their small space is capable of so much more. The moment the next vine unfurls across the screen, its presence feels almost mystical. It grows quietly, never rushing, yet somehow manages to cover an entire structure with grace and intention. Gardeners often underestimate it because it doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't show off. It doesn't demand constant care. Instead, it settles into the garden like an old friend who knows exactly when to speak and when to simply be. But once you realize this plant is edible and that it returns every year with renewed life, it suddenly becomes priceless in a small vertical garden. Its leaves have a tender texture when harvested young, offering a mild flavor that suits almost any dish. Whether tossed fresh, steamed lightly, or added into simmering broths, it adapts. It accepts whatever you give it, just as it accepts any support you provide in the garden. What makes this vine so special is the sense of calm it brings. When it moves, it does so quietly. When it grows, it does so deliberately. It doesn't shoot out aggressive tendrils or overwhelm its neighbors. It simply climbs upward, one gentle step at a time. For gardeners who want food without chaos, this plant becomes the perfect companion. And in a world where so many vegetables need constant attention, this vine reminds us that some of the best harvests come from plants that ask the least. The next plant introduces a different kind of energy. This one is bold, expressive, and full of personality. Its vines twist and turn with determination, grabbing onto trellises, wires, or nearby branches with confidence. If you listen closely, it almost seems to say, "Don't worry, I'll take it from here." And once it begins, it does not slow down. The leaves are edible when cooked, taking on a silky soft texture that blends beautifully with spices and aromatics. The young shoots are crisp and fresh, snapping cleanly between your fingers. And the flowers bring an unexpected brightness to the garden, attracting beneficial insects while also being usable as edible accents. This vine thrives in places where many others fail. Poor soil? It adapts. Strong heat? It welcomes it. Partial shade? It grows anyway. And with each passing year, the root system strengthens, allowing it to return even more vigorously. For gardeners working with tight budgets, this plant is a lifesaver. It's one of those rare perennial vines that gives deeply while asking for next to nothing in return. The next vine in the lineup introduces a sense of charm. It has slender stems that dance with the wind, moving gently like strands of ribbon. Its edible features are subtle but delightful. Small leaves that can be sautéed, young shoots that retain a pleasant crunch, and blossoms that bring a mild, almost sweet flavor to herbal teas. In many places around the world, this vine is used more for its calming qualities than for food. But small space gardeners quickly learn that it plays both roles beautifully. It offers nourishment and serenity at the same time. What makes this vine unique in a vertical garden is the softness it adds. Some plants grow in strong, angular patterns. Others grow thick and dense. But this vine grows in a way that feels delicate, almost poetic. It drapes rather than dominates. It frames spaces rather than overtaking them. When grown on a thin trellis or allowed to cascade from a balcony, it creates movement. And movement in a garden is a kind of magic. It transforms stillness into life. Now imagine a vine that produces edible fruit with a refreshing taste, crisp, light, almost cooling. The fruit hangs beneath the canopy, shaped in ways that make visitors pause and say, "I've never seen that before." These fruits may look exotic, but the plant itself is remarkably easy to grow. A single vine, once established, can produce dozens of fruits throughout its season, and the more you harvest, the more it seems determined to give. For gardeners seeking variety in their diet, this vine becomes a treasure. The vine sprawls at first, searching for direction, but once it finds a sturdy vertical support, it climbs quickly. Unlike many fruiting plants that require complicated pruning, this vine needs nothing more than a guiding hand. Occasionally tuck it toward the trellis, occasionally redirect a wandering shoot, and it will handle the rest. In return, it offers not only food, but visual interest. The fruits dangle like decorations, each one adding to the charm of the vertical garden. As the narrator's voice softens, another vine enters the scene. This one is ancient, resilient, and deeply woven into the history of many cultures. It is a plant people walk past every day without realizing how edible, how useful, and how nutritious it is. The young tips can be cooked as vegetables, the leaves can be added to soups, and in some traditions, even the roots are valued. But when trained vertically, the vine takes on an entirely new identity. It becomes a living shade cloth, a protective screen, a natural cooling system. Place this vine near a wall, and it shields the structure from harsh sunlight. Place it near a window, and it reduces indoor heat. Place it on a pergola, and it transforms the space into a shaded oasis. When the breeze passes through its leaves, the sound is soft, like the quiet whisper of nature. And as a perennial, it returns every year with renewed strength, often growing faster with each season. The next vine shifts the energy once more. This one is robust, vigorous, and deeply generous. It climbs with conviction, stretching upward in long, fluid movements. Its edible parts are surprisingly diverse. Tender leaves, crunchy shoots, sometimes even edible flowers or pods depending on the variety. In many gardens, this vine becomes the backbone of the vertical structure, the one plant that anchors the design. For gardeners who value both food and aesthetics, this vine is a perfect match. Its growth pattern is dense enough to provide privacy, yet airy enough to allow light through. And small spaces where every inch matters, it becomes both a food source and an architectural element. You could sit beneath its shade, enjoy a breeze, harvest leaves for dinner, and admire the way it transforms the environment, all from one plant. As the list continues, one of the most remarkable vines appears. This plant produces leaves that are edible raw when tender and cooked when mature. The shoots are prized in many cuisines for their crisp texture, and the vine itself can reach impressive heights, making it ideal for gardeners who need a strong vertical performer. What truly sets it apart is its resilience. Drought? It manages. Heavy rain? It recovers. Insects? It adapts. It is, in many ways, a survivor, a plant that keeps giving even in less than ideal conditions. This vine teaches gardeners an important lesson. Abundance comes from persistence, and this plant persists with quiet determination. Once it finds a vertical support, it clings firmly and grows with confidence. It becomes a symbol of strength in a small space, proving that limited square footage does not limit what a garden can produce. When the next vine emerges, the viewer sees something almost ornamental. Delicate leaves, pretty patterns, and soft tendrils. But beneath that beauty lies a plant with surprising food value. Its young leaves offer a mild green flavor. Its shoots can be sautéed or steamed, and depending on the variety, even the immature pods may be edible. The vine grows steadily, draping itself in gentle arcs that soften any hard structure. For gardeners working with balconies or patios, this plant brings elegance without overwhelming the space. Finally, the last perennial vine completes the vision. This one is a powerhouse of growth, capable of rising quickly and returning each year with renewed vigor. Its edible parts vary by region. Sometimes it's the shoots, sometimes the leaves, sometimes even the young fruit. But regardless of the part used, the plant becomes a symbol of abundance in the vertical garden. Its growth pattern is dynamic, occasionally wild, but always beautiful. It fills empty spaces with life. It converts forgotten corners into productive zones. And most importantly, it reminds gardeners that food doesn't always come from the ground. Sometimes it grows above eye level, hanging, cascading, weaving, climbing. As the narration shifts toward conclusion, the tone becomes reflective. The viewer has now met 10 perennial climbing vines, all different, all useful, all capable of transforming even the tiniest garden into a vertical paradise. These plants aren't just about growing food, they're about changing how gardeners think. They're about seeing opportunity in places others ignore. They're about reimagining walls, fences, balconies, and structures as blank canvases where edible life can flourish. The narrator speaks gently, as if guiding the viewer to a revelation. A garden is not limited by land. It is limited only by imagination. And once a gardener begins to see upward, the world opens. Vertical gardening isn't a trend, it's a mindset. It's a way of maximizing abundance while minimizing cost, effort, and space. With perennial vines, the garden becomes easier each year. Less planting, less spending, less maintenance, more harvest, more beauty, more life. Picture your own garden now. Picture the empty spaces. Picture the walls, the railings, the corners, the neglected structures. Now imagine them alive, with vines weaving and climbing, offering fruit, leaves, shoots, flowers. Imagine stepping outside and harvesting food from eye level, from overhead, from a wall that once held nothing. Imagine the shade, the movement, the sound of leaves, the feeling of stepping into a space that surrounds you with edible greenery. That is the garden you can create. Not next year, not someday, but now. With perennial edible vines that return every season, multiply over time, and turn vertical space into a gift that keeps giving. As the cadence slows, the narrator's voice settles into a soft, concluding calm. Viewers are reminded that gardening is not just about growing plants, it's about growing possibility. It's about discovering that abundance doesn't come from having more land. It comes from learning how to use the space you already have. It's about shifting perspective, embracing creativity, and inviting nature to rise with you. Because when you choose perennial edible vines for your vertical garden, you're not just planting, you're building, you're shaping, you're designing a living system that grows, evolves, and provides year after year. And in that moment, a small garden becomes a limitless one. A simple fence becomes a food source. A forgotten wall becomes a sanctuary. A small space becomes a vertical Eden. And just like that, you realized you were never limited. You simply needed to look up.